Hey you, thank you so much for clicking on this video. So in my previous videos, many of you beautiful people appreciated me for my communication skills. Thank you so much for that, by the way. You guys also requested that I do a video on how to improve communication skills and also how to improve our communication when we are sitting for job interviews. I thought that this is a great topic to talk about, and so today's video is going to be about improving our communication. So let's get right into it. So firstly, I wanted to talk about how I improved my communication skills, and to be very honest with you, it happened very naturally with time. I did not really force any of that. So as a kid, my schooling happened in an English medium school. Also, I was very naturally drawn towards English movies and English songs. I used to watch a lot of Disney Channel and English movies and listen to a lot of Avril Lavigne and Linkin Park during my teenage years, and I think that is how I developed interest in the English language, and that's how I eventually got better at speaking English. And so my first tip to you all for developing your communication skills would be consuming a lot of English content in the form of movies and also in the form of songs, especially if you want to improve your verbal communication. I was never really a reader, so I never read a lot of books. I used to consume a lot of screen content, that is movies and songs and stuff like that, and so that is how I have developed my communication. If you're a reader, that's great. You can read a lot of English books, watch a lot of English movies, and listen to a lot of songs to improve your language skills and especially broaden your vocabulary for that matter. And I know that this tip number one was a very obvious tip, that you should consume a lot of content of that language. It's very obviously understood. But what most people will not tell you is that start thinking your thoughts in English. And this is my personal experience as well. This started happening very naturally with me. I don't really remember when I started thinking my thoughts in English, but this happened in due course of time because I was consuming a lot of English language content, listening to a lot of songs, and also interacting with a lot of people who were from the US or the UK. One fine day, I just started thinking my thoughts in English. And now, whenever I'm thinking, 99% of the time it's in English. And I think that that is where the flow of my speaking and my vocabulary and my intonation really comes from. So, I would suggest that as you are consuming content, also try to reinforce thinking in English. Once you start training your subconscious mind in the English language, it would become very easy for you to speak more fluently and confidently. Now, moving on to tip number 2, and the tip number 2 would be practicing. And I know this is also very obvious, but the more you practice, the better you get at speaking. It's the universal truth. If you are still studying, if you are still in college, try to interact in English with your professors and with your friends. If you have a job, treat your team meetings as a platform for public speaking, especially in English. I do that a lot. Whenever I have team meetings with my team, I treat that as a platform to, let's say, deliver a speech. So I would suggest practice, practice, and practice speaking in English as much as you can, because that plays a very crucial role in developing your communication skills. Now, coming on to tip number 3, and tip number 3 is very much related to the tip number 2 that I just mentioned, that is, practicing speaking. Many of us withhold ourselves from practicing because we focus too much on the grammar. We are always worried about if our grammar is going to come out wrong or if whatever we speak would be technically correct or not. So I would suggest, don't let grammar hold you back. Don't let the technicalities of a language hold you back from speaking that language, because at the end of the day, trust me when I tell you this, technicalities don't really matter. Communication in its essence is basically you delivering a message and the second party understanding you. So as long as you are able to deliver a message correctly, and as long as the party in front of you is able to understand you, that is successful communication. No matter how your grammar is, or no matter how broken your English is, or no matter how and breaks you use while delivering your message, as long as you are delivering a clear message, your communication is successful. So I would suggest, don't hold yourself back just because you find yourself trapped in the nitty-gritties of grammar. Also, to let you know about how grammar is not really important in delivering the message, I have a small piece of text for you here with me, and I would like to read it out to you. So the first version that I would read would have no grammatical errors per se, and the second version of the same text that I would read would have some grammatical errors. And maybe it's a small exercise for you at this point, that in the second version you can guess what are the grammatical errors that I have made, and if that really made a difference in delivering the message that I wanted to deliver or not. This is version 1, which does not have any grammatical errors. Let me tell you about a story of an old woman who bought a house in the woods. The house was old and so it was cheap. After she bought it, she decided to renovate it. However, the damages were so big that the renovations would cost her the entirety of her savings. I guess she saved money on the initial purchase but didn't really think it through. Now, in the version 2, I will deliver this message with some grammatical errors and also with some humanness in it. Let me tell you about a story of an old woman who brought a house in the woods. The house was old and so it was cheap. After she brought it, she decides to renovate it, but the damages are so big that the renovations would costing her the entire savings. I guess she saved money on the initial purchase, but I guess she didn't thought it through. Now, when you heard version 1 and version 2, I bet you were able to understand both the versions, both the stories. If I would have spoken the version 2 first, you would have been able to understand it anyway. It did have some grammatical errors. Nevertheless, you were able to understand it as a listener. And so that's my point. I will be very honest with you. Even in my own videos, when I sat down to edit those videos, I have spotted a lot of grammatical errors that I made during recording, but it doesn't really matter. As long as you are able to deliver the message that you want to convey, that's the point of having a conversation. That's the point of communication. I know that good grammar is like cherry on the top of the cake. It really helps you become a good orator. It really helps you become more confident. And trust me, good grammar comes along with practice. That's why I said, the more you practice, the better you become at the game. But at the end of the day, nobody really remembers. Nobody really remembers the grammatical mistakes you make. Also, whenever you are speaking to someone in English and whenever you have to explain them something or maybe deliver a message to them, it is very important that you are able to deliver whatever you want to deliver and not deviate from the subject. And so, this would bring me to my fourth tip: think before you speak. I have observed that writing in English is a lot easier than speaking in English in real time. And that is so because when we're writing, we can take as much pauses as we want to think what we have to write, right? That is why writing is so easy. You can write 10 pages in English rather than speak 10 pages impromptu. It's because you are thinking before you're writing. You're using your brain, you are collecting your thoughts on what to write before you're writing it down on paper. Try doing this practice when you are speaking as well. Think about what do you really want to speak about and what is the message that you really want to deliver. Once you have that thought in your head compiled, that is where you can do the execution of delivering the message. First we compile and then we execute. That is how programs work as well. And so I would suggest, make it a habit of thinking before you speak and taking maybe a 3 to 5 second pause before you are about to reply in a conversation or before you're about to initiate a conversation. Actually, you know what? Pauses are more important in a conversation than the actual speaking part. Pausing in conversations also reinforces to your listeners that you are in fact thinking before you're speaking. So whatever you're about to speak, if you take a pause before speaking that would reinforce the fact that whatever you're about to speak is well thought of and it's important. Communication is not just your words, it's also how you're taking a pause, how you're thinking before you're speaking, and how you're emoting when you are speaking something. Which would bring me to my tip number, I don't know, 4 or 5. I think it's 5. And that would be emoting when speaking. So like I said, that communication is not just about speaking a lot of big words and difficult words. It's not that. In fact, it's none of that. Communication is more about how well you are able to emotionally portray yourself rather than just using words to portray yourself. So I would suggest, when you're watching movies and listening to songs and consuming English content, try to identify the characters of a movie or a book that you really like and try to embody their mannerisms or how they are really speaking or how they are really emoting. Use that as motivation to bring those emotions into your own communication. You know, hand gestures, how your head is moving, how your shoulders are moving. All this is very important. And even though you cannot really see my hands because the framing is that way, but trust me, I use a lot of my hands, I use a lot of my shoulders, I use my head, I use my eyes, I use my eyebrows to make sure that I'm emoting and putting out the right emotion that I want to convey in my message. And before you start to emote, you need to know what you want to emote. And that is where thinking before speaking comes into the picture. While you're thinking about the message that you want to portray, you need to identify the feeling that you want to convey through your message and also emote that feeling. For example, if the message that you want to convey is that of authority, you need to make sure that your tone is that of authority. Another example would be that if your message is something that wants to convey an emotion of feeling sorry, you need to make sure that your voice is soft enough and that you're feeling that emotion of being sorry when you're saying sorry, because that is how you make the other person believe that you mean it. Emotions are also a great way of engaging your audience, making them listen to you. A flat tone can be really boring and really put other people to sleep, and so that is also a reason why you want to emote when you're talking. I can give you one example of how emoting really makes a difference, and for that I will use the same piece of text that I used for the grammar thing. Version 1 of this text that I read would be really flat, and the version 2 would be full of emotions, pauses, and giving it a human touch. Version 1. Let me tell you about a story of an old woman who bought a house in the woods. The house was old and so it was cheap. After she bought it, she decided to renovate it. However, the damages were so big that the renovations would cost her the entirety of her savings. I guess she saved money on the initial purchase but didn't really think it through. While I was reading it, I was bored. Version 2. Let me tell you about a story of an old woman who bought a house in the woods. The house was old and so it was cheap. However, the damages were so big that the renovations would cost her the entirety of her savings. I guess she saved money on the initial purchase but didn't really think it through. So, wasn't version 2 more engaging than version 1? So yeah, your pauses, your emotions, even your and and stuff like that brings a touch of humanness to your speaking. And trust me, that humanness is needed in a conversation. You cannot be a perfect robot while speaking. So yeah, to summarize this video, tip number 1 would be consuming a lot of English content in the form of books or movies or songs, and also thinking your thoughts in the English language, reinforcing the English language into your subconscious mind. Tip number 2 would be practice and practice speaking English as much as you can. Tip number 3 would be not to focus on the nitty-gritties of English grammar, rather focus on the message that you want to convey through your speaking. Tip number 4 is related to tip number 3 on how to focus on the message, is to think before you speak. compile the message in your mind before you perform the execution of speaking that message, and also to think what you want to speak. Take pauses while you are speaking. Tip number 5 would be emoting, focusing on the emotion of the message that you want to convey and emoting that while you are speaking, and making sure that you are using your hand gestures, you're using your shoulder gestures, your facial expressions, your eyebrows, your eyes while you are speaking to someone. So yeah, that is it for this video. Thank you so much for the suggestion, you guys. It was a great suggestion and I really enjoyed doing a video on this topic. So thank you so much for this suggestion. I hope that this video helps you improve your own communication skills. I am thinking of doing a separate video on communication skills that you can use in interviews, because sitting in interviews is not just about communication, it's a little bit more than that. And so I think that covering that in a separate video would be much better, and I will definitely do that. So yeah, thank you so much for watching if you watched till the end, and I hope to see you soon. Till then, take care.